This is the Biden administration's achievements, part 3. Tax fairness and fiscal responsibility. President Biden fought to build a fairer tax system that rewards work, not just wealth, that asks the wealthiest Americans and largest corporations to pay their fair share, and requires all Americans to play by the same rules and pay the taxes they owe. President Biden took the following actions to make this a reality. Secured historic legislation through the Inflation Reduction Act to make the tax code fairer, from enacting a 15% corporate minimum tax so that billion-dollar companies can't get away with paying $0 in federal income taxes. Can't get away with it. And imposing a 1% surcharge on corporate stock buybacks, to giving the International Revenue Service the tools it needs to make wealthy tax cheats pay the taxes they owe, the fair amount. Biden used increased IRS funding to collect more than $1 billion in unpaid taxes from delinquent millionaires, launch enforcement action against 25,000 millionaires who have not filed a tax return since 2017, and crack down on high-end tax evasion like illegally structured complex partnerships that reduce tax liability or deducting personal use of corporate jets as a business expense. In total, the IRS was projected to collect hundreds of billions of dollars in additional revenue over the next decade. Biden expanded the Affordable Care Act premium tax credit to save millions of people an average of $800 per year in health insurance premiums. Biden expanded the child tax credit that cut child poverty nearly in half to an historic low in 2021. Committed to investing in America responsibly. After the previous administration, before Biden, we know who that was, added $8 trillion to the debt. I need to pause here. Trump 1 added $8 trillion to our national debt. The Biden administration took it down to $1 trillion lower. Thanks in large part to a strong economic recovery from the pandemic. It's huge. Biden signed into law $1 trillion in deficit reduction over the next 10 years, getting us out of debt, including by enacting a corporate minimum tax, lowering prescription drug costs, and cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. I have to pause here to just remind everybody that in total, Donald Trump has only paid about $750 in taxes his entire life. I digress. Biden kept his promise not to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. Next, affordable housing. Upon entering office, President Biden confronted a housing crisis where millions of Americans were facing eviction related to the economic impacts of the pandemic. In response, the Biden-Harris administration deployed unprecedented tools to keep Americans housed, delivered aid to over 8 million renters and more than 500,000 homeowners through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and other assistance included in the American Rescue Plan. Powered a first-of-its-kind national eviction prevention infrastructure that kept eviction filings below pre-pandemic levels after the expiration of the national eviction moratorium. Took quick action through the Federal Housing Administration after the onset of COVID to ensure that 1.7 million households at risk of losing their homes could keep them. Biden cut fees for more than 1 million borrowers with mortgages insured by the Federal Housing Administration by more than $900 a year. President Biden also focused on building more housing to lower housing costs. Housing units under construction hit a 50-year high under the Biden-Harris administration. President Biden increased the rate of new housing starts by 16% compared to the previous administration. Rents fell in many places during President Biden's last year in office as a result of new supply, and the home ownership rate is higher now than it was before the pandemic. Biden introduced a bold plan to build and renovate more than 2 million homes and announced new steps to lower home buying and refinancing closing costs and crack down on corporate actions that rip off renters. Biden called on Congress during his 2024 State of the Union address to pass legislation to lower costs by $10,000 for first-time home buyers through a mortgage relief credit and provide up to $25,000 in down payment assistance. Finally, President Biden took unprecedented steps to strengthen tenant protections and increase fairness in the rental market, as well as steps to ensure that all households have an opportunity to build generational wealth by purchasing a home. President Biden led a coordinated effort to root out discrimination in the home appraisal and home buying process. He launched a task force to address the appraisal gap, the likelihood that homes in communities of color are undervalued compared to homes in majority white communities, leading to a cut in the gap by roughly 40%. Making markets fairer and cracking down on junk fees and corporate greed. That's why they bashed him. Let's continue. Making markets fairer and cracking down on junk fees and corporate greed. This is why mainstream media bashed him. President Biden took a number of actions to root out and end illegal corporate behavior that raise prices through anti-competitive, unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent business practices. President Biden and his administration created the Competition Council, chaired by the Director of National Economic Council, with the heads of 15 agencies to address corporate consolidation, monopolization, and unfair competition. Biden launched a new strike force on unfair and illegal pricing, co-chaired by the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission, to lower costs for American families. Biden worked with Congress to pass bipartisan legislation to boost funding for federal antitrust enforcers. The administration increased annual funding to the DOJ Antitrust Division by $66 million and to the FTC by nearly $100 million to boost funding for federal antitrust enforcers. Biden banned bait and switch marketing tactics in the car buying process. Fought to cut credit card late fees from an average of $32 down to $8. Biden banned junk health insurance plans, required cable and satellite television providers to disclose all fees up front, required internet service providers to provide customers clear, easy to understand, and accurate information about the cost and performance of high-speed internet services. Ban the use of non-compete clauses in employment contracts so companies cannot stop regular people from switching jobs or starting new businesses. Biden required airlines to provide automatic refunds and disclose upfront fees for checked bags and changing flights. Proposed a rule to prevent airlines from charging parents extra just to sit next to their kid. Finalized a rule to require companies to make it as easy to cancel a subscription or service as it was to sign up for one. He announced increased scrutiny of banks that are heavily dependent on junk fees, leading to many banks eliminating these kinds of fees and resulting in a decline of $5.5 million in these ripoffs annually. Biden capped overdraft fees at $5, which was expected to save consumers $5 billion annually. Biden banned hidden junk fees in the event, ticketing, hotel, and lodging industries. Taken together, President Biden's actions were slated to cut junk fees by more than $20 billion annually. catalyzing a small business boom. President Biden believed that starting a new small business is an act of hope and confidence in the economy. Small businesses account for more than 40% of gross domestic product, create more than half of new jobs, and employ nearly half of all private sector workers. Under the Biden-Harris administration, small business growth boomed. American entrepreneurs filed an historic 21 million new business applications since 2021, more than during any other presidential administration on record. In 2024 alone, the SBA backed an historic $56 billion in loans and investments to small businesses. The American Rescue Plan State Small Business Credit Initiative provided nearly $10 billion to increase access to capital and investment in small businesses through innovative financing programs. Federal agencies awarded the highest ever amount of federal contracts in terms of both absolute value and share of overall contracting dollars to small businesses and small disadvantaged businesses in 2024. Through the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden-Harris administration preserved the American Rescue Plan's premium tax credit supports for the Affordable Care Act, saving millions of small business owners and self-employed workers an average of $700 per year on their health insurance premiums. I'm going to shut this down and start a new video, leaving off on small business owners and self-employed workers saving an average of $700 per year on their health insurance premiums. Okay, I'll be back with more.